Hey, what's up, everyone? You're currently tuned into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and NNetRadio.com, Tijuana. Today, Lietoc and I are joined by Hudson Valley-folk musician, ambient dweller, bartender, and world's longest memoir penner, Ben Sereten. In 2020, he released Youth Pastoral to acclaim on Whatever's Clever, and followed less than a year later with Cicada Waves, an ambient piano tape for NNA Tapes. And finally, a self-released Sandhill music cassette with limited copies available. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. How are y'all doing?
Doing well, dude. Thanks for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. I appreciate the invite.
Heck yeah. So how's personal life been going outside of music? Are you still bartending as your slate piece from last September
indicated there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Still bartending. So basically I refer to it as doing like venue work, because any given night I'm bartending, I'm doing live sound, I'm running the door, whatever needs to get done at various venues throughout the area where I live.
That's cool. Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like I've seen on like your stories that you're like running sound and stuff.
Yeah. So there's a bar in Troy called No Fun. That's kind of more like there's a lot of like dark wave, electro clash, like goth acts through there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's also like a lot of touring psych rock, and then kind of all over the place stylistically. But those are kind of the big. It's more of like that style of venue. It's a little more. It's like a louder place. You know, it's like a big loud room.
That's sick.
And I bartend there. I do sound there. I work the door there. And up until this weekend, I lived like 5 minutes walking from there. So that was kind of like my home base. Oh, nice. But I also do sound there's another venue called the Avalon Lounge. That's just like a wonderful place. That's a little more like the venue's separate from the bar, and the bar is kind of classy, and they have like soju cocktails and Korean food.
Oh, nice. That's sick.
Great spot. And then like I've done sound at Basilica Hudson, which is another spot that's kind of well known in the area. There's a couple theaters I've done sound out, and just kind of whatever I can pick up. I'm on the scene.
That's cool, that dude. Basilica spot? Is that related to the Basilica soundscape?
Yeah, the one and the same. So
I would love to go there for that. Yes.
Well, this is a good moment. I mean, I don't know how many listeners you have in driving range of Hudson, New York, but next month there's the 24-hour drone festival at Basilica.
Oh, dude, that's sick.
Drones on drones? Drone not drone? Oh.
Yeah, it's their other like big festival that they do, and it's 24 uninterrupted hours of music. People are encouraged to like put out a sleeping bag on the big concrete floor, and everybody kind of like sleeps as the music goes through the night.
That's so sick.
Really special event. I get to play it this year with a quartet of 3 other musicians. We're gonna improvise together for the first time live, which is very cool.
So how long is your set for that? Like how long are you guys playing?
We're going to play for an hour. That's kind of like the standard slot, but they're trying something new where kind of like the headliners, quote unquote, of the festival are doing like a longer 3-hour set each.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be a 3-hour, there's a 3-hour Laraji and RC Onda
that's crazy.
Set planned with some, it's a crazy lineup. They just added Wolf Eyes this week.
Oh, wow. That's sick.
Yeah. So it'll be a sick. I've attended twice in the past, and I'm really glad it's coming back.
And that's in Hudson Valley, you were saying? Is that like that area?
It's in the town of Hudson. Yeah,
we had M. Geddes Gangcrest on the show a while back.
Oh yeah,
isn't he from Hudson Valley or something too? I think.
Yes, he lives in Hudson actually. And I don't know if you know this, but he and I just started a band together.
Really,
dude? That's so you guys had that show together like last month. Yeah. So
we played together, and then we played together again like 2 weeks ago, and we like shook hands on it, and now it's officially a band.
Dude, that's so sick.
Yeah, we're called Friends Meeting.
Friends Meeting, hell yeah.
Yeah,
that's the name.
that's the name. Yeah.
What kind of music are you guys doing?
It's very so basically like I'm doing a lot of lap steel and a little bit of like kind of Cicada Wave style, like electric piano playing. And then I'm like processing some singing, and he takes my signal and then runs it through his modular rig.
Nice.
So it really is kind of like the midpoint of our two like vibier approaches. But the last thing we played together kind of unexpectedly took it in like a Balearic kind of like almost samba, E2, E4 energy. So I love that style of music, and I've like secretly wanted to make like disco and house music my whole life. So I'm really excited by that possibility. So yeah, we're just getting started. We played 2 gigs together, and we're working on it. I think we're gonna have like a digital release come out in like 2 months.
Dude, that's so sick. I'm super stoked for that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's a sweetie too. So, you know.
Dude, super nice dude. We had him on the show like a few months back or something. I forget when, but yeah, one of the nicest people ever.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a great buddy to play music with.
So are you booking shows out there too? Or are you mostly just like running other people's shows sort of deal?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of booking, and that's something I did a lot before COVID. I used to run a venue out of my living room when I lived in Brooklyn.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, and it was like kind of the nexus of my whole music endeavor out there was putting these shows on in my living room.
That's
so I'd like to get back to that place, but I don't have access to a venue where like the financials and the vibe make sense for the kind of stuff that I want to do.
Yeah.
It's a challenge because like I booked a really great show for the composer Jason Calhoun, whose music I really adore, and I really just respect his whole thing. And I've like wanted to play a show with him for forever. And he hit me up to, you know, try and put a show on. And everywhere I tried, I ended up having to book it in the afternoon. No Fun, this kind of like notoriously loud bar. We had a good turnout, but like I couldn't afford to pay staff for it, so we kind of ended up doing it like by donation, and I was like bartending and doing sound and the door simultaneously, which is fine. It was we were running it, you know, like a house show. But yeah, I have become so sensitive to the challenge of finding income and revenue as a musician. But then on the other side of it, like venue workers are just as challenged in scaring up money, I feel, and are often like struggling musicians themselves. So, and I also I'm sensitive to the fact that most venues that are successful, if they're like established, you know, not just basement house shows or whatever, they're essentially like they're alcohol stores with a music component. Yeah. And I don't know, something clicked for me during the long hiatus of COVID that like I didn't want to just be a beer salesman anymore. I didn't want to like do this thing that's really precious to me and important in the hopes that the people who come to participate in it buy a few rounds. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I just love having like all ages shows where it's like, I don't know, no alcohol involved. You know what I mean? People are just coming for the good hang, you know?
Yeah. And I think like there's a difference between financial reward and pay and like nourishment. Because obviously, you know, as a musician, you can have a well-paying gig that doesn't feed your well-being in any way besides like paying the bills. And I really want to find the most nourishing possible avenue for booking things before I really like take up the mantle of putting on shows again.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
Are there any like, I don't know, DIY spots around where you can kind of like separate work from just having shows or anything?
I'm sure there are. I think like from what I've gathered, like obviously things are starting to ease up and people are much less skittish and cautious with their gatherings now. At least out here in the Hudson Valley, you only get about like 5 months of viable outdoor time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I think like the outdoor, I'm so impressed with what I've seen from like more temperate areas, especially like the West Coast and California specifically, like taking the hang outside and making it thoughtful and participatory. I think that's just so cool.
Like floating.
And I'm sure there are spaces out here. Yeah, well, floating's like the pinnacle of it. They've really like got it down to a science.
They do.
Yeah. And I just think it's so cool to see something that isn't just, I don't get me wrong. I think venues are amazing and it's so cool that they exist. They're like they feel really radical to me, especially being like on the other side of the bar. It's like, it's so cool to see people willingly gather together. It like really makes me feel hopeful.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that, you know, it's alcohol fueled, but I think in a pre-COVID world, people were a little more daring with the space that they had to share. And now, rightfully so, people want to be considerate in a lot of different ways. And it's, yeah, I think it would be more challenging to like convince a random church to let you do something, for instance.
Oh yeah, I could totally see that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Maddie, do you want to take this one right here? This like bullet point.
Well, we're still in the opening round.
Yeah, well, we're still there.
We're continuing to tiptoe around this. Some stuff we'll get to later, but most recent edition of the My Big Break newsletter seemed to hint that you'd been giving away a massive stock of physical media, and we were just wondering what's up. I mean, we kind of can see behind you. I think we know what's up. We talked just before, but you just moved, and
yes,
we're contemplating your physical media and what you.
Wait, so what did I suggest? Hold on, I'm dance around it a little less delicately because I don't know if I'm picking up on what you're saying.
Well, in the last newsletter that you had, you were talking about different physical media along with different objects that you've kind of acquired over the past years, but also then getting rid of them and kind of just freer as a result of that. How has that been?
Oh, it's been good. I mean, so my partner who I'm living with and was living with before, she's a sculptor and has a really great fondness for objects and makes a lot of objects, like literally makes giant, larger than me fountains and 3D printed like morphing ladies. And there's like, we had to move, you know, everything from her studio, all of her tools, all of her work, all of like our accumulated stuff. And we lived in Troy for almost 3 years. And it's amazing like how much stuff we managed to accumulate in what felt like a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing. I mean, every time I like discarded something or found a new home for it, it really did feel like a lightning. It is pretty remarkable. And yeah, I found like unexpected homes for things too. Like I had like some like misprints, like the jackets were, they were like records that I got from the run of Youth Pastoral vinyl that I made that were like so dinged and damaged that they were unsellable, like not even at a discounted price. And the only way I could ever like introduce them as stock again would be to like get the thing printed. It was logistically basically like I was hanging on to them, but they had nowhere to go. But then I made like a little, in my Instagram story, I was just like, I can't believe I have to carry these records around some more. And some buddies of mine from a local band in Troy called Boss Crowley, all three of them independently were like, I will take one off your hands, like bring it to my house. So I like put together a little goodie bag of like, you know, the like last 15 LPs that my band from college made in 2010. So I've been carrying these records around for 13 years. I think I can finally like part with them.
Yeah. That's
but I was able to like find a new home for them. And it was a nice act, you know?
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. But don't make no mistake. The shelves behind me will be filled shortly. I have to still have plenty of stuff, even though there is a huge purge.
One thing that you mentioned through all of this purge is a new fondness, or at least an increasing fondness for the compact disc format. How's it feeling? How's it feeling joining the CD gang here?
Listen, I don't know what has happened to me.
I get you. Don't worry.
I don't know. Something clicked like up until maybe a year ago. I was so happy to hear music in whatever format and could accept it on whatever terms. And all of a sudden now I'm hearing the artifacts. I'm hearing like, man, this DJ set I'm listening to on SoundCloud sounds like ass. It's streaming over, and like I'm using Bluetooth headphones right now. Like I'm hearing the compression.
Yeah.
I'm so irritated with myself that that's true. But then like the CD, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The fidelity is ridiculous. Yeah. Especially like, I mean, I don't, like, I'm not like a mastering engineer or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm an attentive listener, but I'm not like trained in that way. But like a CD made in like the late 90s, like played on a decent stereo, it's preposterous.
It's absolutely bonkers.
Yes.
As I've known, and I've actually got an order of CDs coming in today. And when the day's all through, we're listening to some Techno Animal on really cheap headphones. But but nope. Right now, I'll just keep saying it. This is the time to buy CDs. I'm getting stuff.
They're still cheap.
It's $1 for if you know where to look. Random stuff keeps showing up, and it's wild.
Yeah.
They are getting kind of expensive, though. Like at my local record store, they are starting to get kind of pricey. I feel like they're realizing that CDs are coming back.
It's not right.
I know.
But we're still like, we're at the point where vinyl was like maybe 20 years ago.
Oh, where, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like the record stores are starting to get hip to it, but the like aunts and uncles of your lives are not.
100%.
So you could still, get you could probably get a grip of like 500 jewel cases from your uncle's house tomorrow. If you
100%.
Yeah. Also, I'll say probably the best record shops that actually aren't record shops selling CDs. It's library bookstores.
Oh yeah. Big time.
Today, what was it? I went to one and I got the first Fiona Apple album and
sounds great on CD, by the way.
It's gonna be great. And you know what? Thomas and I both have had tapes of it and have never been able to get them to work. I don't know what the hell was up with.
Mine doesn't play.
Something happened, and the Columbia or Epic cassette stock between like 91 to 97 is horrid. One out of like two of those tapes is gonna fail you. If it was released on Columbia or Epic, you might be screwed. Just whoops. But CD, that's not gonna fail me. And what was it? It was I got the Voices of Bulgaria thing that 4AD and Electro and such put out. Awesome release. 50 cents a piece.
Nice.
So sick.
Just had to say that. Had to go on the CD tangent. It's time to buy.
Yeah, I respect it, dude. I've got the Discman. I mean, it's not a perfect format by any stretch of the imagination. But, if you find yourself in a early 2000s model vehicle with a 6 CD changer and a soft case CD wallet from back in the day, I mean, you're having a good time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That was honestly, it was once COVID kind of lifted up and I had to drive to work. That was when I moved from tapes to CDs. I still do a ton of tapes, but CDs have been going up consistently for me. And now I'm at a point where I'm renting. I'm renting a lot of stuff in the state of California and able to get what I want on demand usually. And like, just very
fantastic.
Happy. So besides that, we also wanted to commend the Ben Sereten website, which is a dedicated beast. It's an actual real web 2.0 site that still feels fresh. And it hints at a number of services provided. A couple of the ones, at least, has over the course of the last 2 years kind of post Cicada Waves, the personal zone stuff to the artist bios work, the other gigs outside of what you do kind of working venues. Has that been consistently increasing over the past 2 years?
Yeah, well, I used to have like a proper day job before COVID, and that was always kind of my MO. Mm-hmm. And then like pretty unceremoniously lost that job and then had to figure out like how to make it work. And yeah, I've always kind of done a little bit of freelance work here and there, but then like found that there was a real moment of possibility. I think for various reasons, I think government support in the US being a huge one. Uh-huh. It felt like people were really willing to do things like commission a personal recording uh-huh. or like hire me to play at their party, or like I felt like in the 2021, early 2022 world, there was like seemingly a lot of enthusiasm to put money in the hands of people to play music live again. Mm-hmm. And it felt like every show I played after the first big, pause of live music, felt like, yeah, people were more enthusiastic at the merch table. And like, if you were playing for tips, like people would really throw down because it was this new novel thing. And not to be like too cynical about it, but I think like live music has really become normalized for people again. Mm-hmm. And I'm certainly a little inoculated against it because I've seen so many gigs over the last year and a half of working at venues. And I only started working at venues. This No Fun in Troy opened at the end of 2021, kind of out of nowhere. They announced that they were opening and then they were open within like a month.
Whoa.
And yeah, I was just like, I gotta get in here. It's in my neighborhood. I can walk there. I don't know anyone in this town really, because I moved here during COVID. Like I want to like get my foot in the door. And it's been I've seen like every musician in the capital region I've seen play and done sound for them probably twice at this point. But literally the thing I feared, like during that break in COVID, I was like, I don't want the performance of live music to become something routine again. And unfortunately, I'm challenging myself on this, but like there are lots of moments when, you know, I'm working my like third or fourth gig of the week or whatever. I'm like literally just punching the clock, just clocking in. And that's like the thing I didn't want to happen, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think there's been a real change, and it feels a little harder to get people to take the act of faith that like for your listeners who may not be familiar with this, the Personal Tone Zone is like a service that I offer where basically people can reach out and more or less have me fabricate like a recording according to their needs. So I've like soundtracked people's baths. I've like done kind of like anniversary cards in the form of like an ambient soundscape that sounds like, you know, the place they went on vacation to together, like you name it. And like, I've made this kind of like world to provide a service for these people. And I think in this moment of like, music is still like a gift that we need to cherish, and like we don't see it live that often, and I have like stimulus money coming in or whatever. It felt like people were really willing to be like, oh, I'm gonna try this thing that's kind of like weirdly intimate and requires like going through a normal, what would otherwise like be a boundary between me and this like person on the internet or like this performer I've heard play before or whatever. And I feel like the walls are coming back up a little bit, and I want to push against that, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
In whatever small way I can.
Absolutely. Whoa. Yeah. It's just such an incredible perspective on live music, because again, we've talked to other artists that are out there in the Midwest who do want to tour, but due to COVID, it was like we talked with Power Roland Duo, and when they canceled going out to the West Coast, it was because of like COVID protocol and just knowing we can't risk losing all like our livelihood on getting COVID and being stuck in a hotel. But we're very interested in touring and hadn't considered options like that compared to like thinking of like what Pulse Emitter had done when we talked with him, and he was just continuing to make music for himself, but was releasing albums under his own name. COVID had like shifted and kind of moved him to looking inward and then curating what he felt he wanted to do under his moniker.
Totally. Well, and I feel like I'm getting a little soapboxy here, so I apologize. But, you know, working at different local venues has really shown me that like what we kind of conceive of as the music industry, which is like, I see it as like labels that you've heard of, press agents and writers who you've read before, Twitter, social media in general. Like there's kind of like a world that feels like it contains all of music generation culture, and certain venues and certain routes and certain practices and like touring, hopping in the van, all that stuff is part of that. Like kind of like, I can almost see it. It's like it's a sphere that when you're inside of it feels like it contains all possibilities. But what I've really seen from just, you know, I mean, Troy's a cool place. It's like, you know, it's not like in the middle of nowhere, but it's certainly not like a city of prestige in the way that like New York or Los Angeles are, or even Chicago or the bigger American cities. It's a small kind of like Rust Belt kind of like poor city. And there are people there like making music that is just as meaningful to their community or to themselves that will like never be heard by a wider community. It will never break through that like regional bubble. And it's been so eye-opening. I mean, I lived in New York City for 10 years. So I was like the most tunnel vision version of that you could be, but it's so cool. Like, you don't just have to do the same thing that all these other people you see are doing. You can do it any which way. And I think people are starting to think about that. It's a push-pull, because social media makes you feel like, oh, this person went on tour, like I need to go on tour so I can be like as cool as this person. And that's like the weird, like, jealous rivalry, anger, resentment, bad feeling thing that social media is based on. But at the same time, we've been like, we all went crazy a little bit being locked up for so long. And we found out, like, so many people are just like, I never liked touring. I did it for like 10 years and I never enjoyed it. I always felt like it was something I needed to do. So I think it's cool. I'm optimistic about the fact that live music, the creation of music in whatever format, recorded or live or whatever, is resistant to the whatever monoculture is doing at the moment. I think, like, it'll always happen. Like, music will be around for little pockets of people for forever.
Oh yeah.
You bring up again this great point about the Hudson Valley scene, because I've probably really in about 2020, that was the first time I noticed something was happening out there. And it was two things. It was Spookfish, who had done a tape for Lily's Tapes and Discs and had a Fire Talk album from 2016. And then that opened me up to a New York Times article about some of the nature walks and stuff that individual was doing. But as well as Notice recordings out in Kingston, and the fact that they were really heavily promoting like noise shows and doing some really dedicated noise there in the Hudson Valley for a very particular type of head. And it was like, okay, there's something happening here. And then you've got like Ted Davis on Twitter kind of pining a dream about working or like living in the Hudson Valley, or Gaddis Gangris just moving over there and getting into pottery. But there, or even, it was Sarah Hines and her stuff in Ithaca before she had moved over to Bart. There was a real legitimate experimental music scene that's been doing it for itself out there, like really genuinely on a regional level, that moves me. And I'm totally fascinated by it. And to you, I mean, like, how is it that this kind of became that hot belly of activity? And do other people is everyone jamming on each other's records really out there?
Yeah, well, funny you should mention it. I'm playing a Notice show on Thursday.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah, and I think what Notice and Evan are up to is very cool. And it's strange because I feel like I've heard, more or less anecdotally, there are like specific factors that contribute to these things happening in different places, because Bard College is like located close to all of these places. There are people who like go get their MFA from Bard. Sarah Hennies is like a professor of composition at Bard. Do you know the pedal steel player Sam Wank? He makes music as Post Moves.
Oh yeah, Post Moves. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool stuff. He and I, maybe he's finishing up, but he's a student at Bard currently.
Oh, that's sick.
He plays out. I met him at a Notice recording show. We played a show together at Bard in the winter, so you can kind of see how it all like swirls around. But also like the thing that has garnered like seemingly almost like national attention is that like Tubby's in Kingston is kind of like
that was another thing that almost meant to bring up the venue, because at this point that's it. Whenever I think of I just think of the $75 bill recording from there. I was listening to that
exactly
in those COVID months.
Yeah, and it's become kind of like the de facto place. Despite it only holds about 70 people. It's a tiny little venue, but
oh wow. That's
like where kind of any heady ultra ensemble band act ends up playing. And like it's a funny confluence, because like during COVID, Kingston and Hudson were two of the cities that experienced the biggest population growth of any city in the country by capita.
Oh wow.
Because all these people from Brooklyn and the city like fled to the north, where there were like, more isolated, larger homes available. And Yeah, I feel like somebody at some point can do a full, sociological analysis.
Yeah.
The like cattle prow of gentrification that weird music can be sometimes.
Even adding to that, like Island House Recordings, which is tied to both New York City, but also has stuff going on at Hudson Valley, and that guy goes between there. It's like,
yeah, it's like, it's interesting too. There's a whole other component to this, which is that I think a lot of daring, adventurous musicians who have carved out a niche for themselves, starting 10 to 20 years ago. I'm thinking about like the early 2000s, like Brooklyn DIY scene, and I think a lot of the luminaries of music are like kind of transitioning to this like 40s and 50s lifestyle. Like the like guitarist from your favorite noise band like has 3 kids now. Like, what does that mean for like music culture?
Yeah.
And that's like certainly part of what's happening up here too. Is that like, I think there's a real rejection of the all in kind of like grind.
Yeah.
Substance abuse heavy, out all night, like sacrificing your body and your wellness for the sake of your work type thing. Like that's been I think across a lot of disciplines and industries and everything, there's been a rejection of this kind of like martyrdom that was like so prevalent.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I think people are more like, first of all, I feel like it's really interesting because half the Hudson Valley feels like they're sober. So that's like a huge change from what,
that's sick.
People were doing musically like 10 years ago. And I don't know. So there's been like a demographic shift in a certain world of music. But then again, as I was saying earlier, like those are all the people who are like savvy enough or like in it long enough to have a following and have like a presence in a certain ecosystem of connection and association. But there are still like young kids playing in hardcore bands like in every city in America.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you just like you never hear about them unless you are hip to that scene.
Yeah.
It's true.
Okay. Gonna switch it up a little bit here, but we want to say welcome back to KCSB. You had told us a while back that you played on air in like 2008, as well as like a couple gigs in IV with bands such as Sewing Machines and Du Champion. Ben, you've been involved in DIY for quite some time now. What guided you towards DIY, and how did you kind of like get your start and all that?
Oh, I have to really think about this for a second. I mean, it's so interesting because I found myself in Isla Vista on those 2 occasions because at the time, the way to do it was book things through MySpace.
Oh, sick.
And there was a website called DoDIYUSA.com, I think. Wait, I want to check and make sure and see if that's still around or not.
Yeah, there's a website called Do DIY. I don't know if it's the same as what you were talking about, but there is one similar.
Oh, it's the same. And it looks the same, actually.
Oh, that's sick.
Except now they have Instagram logos and a Patreon. Wow, that's interesting. It's so cool that it's like still kind of going. I hadn't checked in on it in some time. But yeah, I mean, I don't know where I got the notion that I could just do it. But ever since I was like maybe, I think the first like quote unquote tour I ever went on was when I was 19.
Oh, that's sick. Yeah.
And I don't know. I just like my buddies and I kind of decided we want to do it. We wanted to do it. And we never like, at the time, we didn't think to like consult with anybody or like ask anyone like what best practices were or like think about like, why would somebody in a town we've never been to want us to come play music for them? Like we didn't consider any of that. Yeah. We just sent messages on MySpace and got enough traction where it was something we kept doing. But over time you find out that like, yeah, if you just go to a random town in Illinois with no if you just just because someone wants you or allows you to come play a show at their venue doesn't mean you're going to have a good time doing it.
Yeah. So when did you get that like perspective shift? Like,
oh, I think almost immediately, because that first tour, there were some really brutal moments.
Like, yeah. Brutal. Do you mean just like low turnouts and stuff, or like?
I mean, that didn't even bother me then. I think like I'm way more sensitive to playing an empty room now than I was when I was a teenager. But I just remember like playing at a hookah lounge outside of Chicago. It was like 45 minutes outside of Chicago.
Oh, gee.
Like, yeah. And it was like they were playing like it was like Batman meets Scooby-Doo. It was like some really bootleg Hanna-Barbera cartoon. They were like projecting it on the stage like while I was trying to play. And I remember asking the bartender, I wasn't even allowed to be in there. I was underage. It's like, hey, could you maybe turn off the movie?
Yeah.
And I was like, no. I was like, oh, okay, I'll just go play my songs now.
That's so weird.
I mean, that's like one of like, 1,000 formative, terrible experiences that you end up having if you play music long enough. But yeah, I mean, I just, I've always been really, it took me a long time to figure out how to articulate it. Mm-hmm. But looking back, I think I can say that I was really motivated by the fact that like the playing of music is people hanging out together, and the playing live of music is a different form of people hanging out together. And that was like my primary motivation. And it often felt like getting other people involved in what felt like it should be a person-to-person interaction was like really besides the point and would dilute some of the experience. But I think also, if I'm being really honest about what drew me to like the DIY world, it's just like, I mean, nobody else wanted it, Yeah. And, yeah, I've gone through times in my life where I felt like, shouldn't I have more help doing this by now? Like, aren't other people like interested in supporting this world I'm trying to build or whatever? But at the end of the day, it feels really great when it's a direct thing. Yeah. Like a straight line, Yeah.
So you mentioned that, or we read in an interview with Pop Matters that you grew up in Orange County and were part of a mega church, while this played a big role in your 2020 work with Youth Pastoral. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah.
The church background stuff just always fascinates me. I have family in Texas, so I know of mega church culture from that aspect, but it's very early as well. And yet we just talked with Lula Asplund, and they also came out of churches in Salt Lake. And so it was like, whoa, just because when I think of like, hey, what's the best place to play actually in the United States? It's a mega church. The acoustics, everything about it is kind of insane how well they've like cornered that market.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a joke that, if you want to find advice about like what gear to buy, you should go to like a worship praise band like forum first and see like what those dudes are doing.
Yeah.
And it's like a joke about how like, oh yeah, that's a very like Christian pedal board you got there.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Also comes up. But with Starfire 59, and I think about
that's a straight Christian band. Yeah.
Those Christians were really on when it came to making pedal based music. Just incredible.
Yeah, dude. I mean, if we're being really honest, the church, the church taught me many things, and many of those things I've tried to forget. But the thing that's maybe stuck with me the longest is like the power of communion and the sorcery available to like somebody with like a coordinated and like considered band of musical believers.
Yeah.
I think some of the most like profound musical experiences of my entire life happened in the youth room worship band. So,
were you playing music back then or?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up like doing school orchestra stuff, like playing cello, and I took piano lessons and stuff. But no one in my family is really religious now, but when I was growing up, my mom and my sister were like, my mom worked at the church I went to, and my mom and my sister were both in the church choir, and I went to like Bible study, summer camp, youth group, Sunday service. I was like at the church all the time. And eventually kind of like got the like middle school youth group to let me like start playing bass for them. And that was like that was really like the first band I ever played in.
That's cool.
Yeah, honestly, it was really cool that they let me do that. I can't imagine that I was any good doing it. So, big ups to them for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's dope.
Yeah. And it was like, I feel like I've seen a tweet to this effect going around, but it's like, you think that you love God, but actually you just love live music. And I think that was like really my experience for a really formative period of time in my life. And
that's so sick. What a good quote.
Yeah. But I feel like I have to put a disclaimer on it because especially after putting out that record, I've had so many conversations with people who are ex-Christian and really identify with that strongly and have had really profound traumatic experiences because there's just such a wide spectrum of what being in the church means to people in America. There's like such a huge spectrum of what faith is. And the mega churches of Southern California were very like typically relaxed, like stereotypically relaxed, it's kind of like the bedrock of that record. But like the guy who baptized me was like literally an amateur BMX rider and would like show us his surfing clips and his sick jumps before he gave sermons to youth group.
That's sick.
So,
have you ever seen any of it was Kyle Mooney from SNL, his Inside SoCal stuff?
Oh yeah. It's really accurate.
The one about the BMX rider who finds God. Yep, that's right on the money.
Yeah.
That's beautiful though. It's just like, okay, these people are vibing, and I definitely have seen that. They continue to increase or encroach across San Diego County, and I'm always a little hesitant and kind of stranged out, but I also get why and how it kind of just is. It's it's a whole other topic, I feel, but the most famous Southern California megachurch is Saddleback, which is at the time that I was like still in the church, it was the second largest church in America. And Rick Warren was its pastor, and he was like George W. Bush's personal spiritual advisor.
Really?
And I feel like a lot of what we're experiencing now politically actually stems from like Rick Warren's particular brand of like weaponized evangelicalism.
Oh, sick.
Yeah. I think a lot of the people who are like Facebook zombies now and are like total, like they've like been tricked into like, Christo-fascism accidentally by like posts. I think they were probably like reading The Purpose-Driven Church, 10, 15 years ago.
Whoa.
But that's a whole other topic. So like there is like an intense version of the mega church that is also like, at least and maybe this is like the unexamined, almost like rosy view of my childhood growing up. But like, I feel like most of the time it would be like one out of maybe 6 or 7 conversations with the youth pastor would involve like hellfire. But then most of the time it was like, come on, man, how bad can life be? Like God made the sun and we're playing disc golf. Like that's cool.
And disc golf rocks. It's such a good sport.
Well, again, you think you love God, but actually you just love disc golf.
Yeah, right. Disc golf.
Yeah.
I remember when I went to like a big church like that in like middle school and I was like really into skateboarding, they just let us skate, like before and like after. And that's primarily why I went, because I remember there was like this really cool like youth pastor dude named Mike who I connected with because he was really good at skating and he would like travel to like other countries skating. And I was like, dude, this guy's sick. He goes to France and he skates there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he'd be like, dude, like, let's watch like Stay Gold, like the new America video. And I'm like, dude, I'm so down, man. And that's like,
and then he's like, who else could bust an impossible flip?
Yeah, and then they would like turn it, and then they would like turn it into that. And I remember that's when I would always be like, "Oh man, like,
yeah, exactly.
I don't want to go back in there." Like I remember there's this like one like traumatic one where this like youth sermon where they were just like telling everybody about like I don't know, exorcisms or something. It was around October and I was like, I don't want to hear this, dude. Like, I'm just trying to skate. Like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? I'm like 13 or something. Like, why are you making me feel guilty about all this like random stuff in my life? But
yeah, exactly.
Anyways, yeah. Church can be sick.
Well, I think like the part of church that is people with good intention gathering together to witness like their peers exhibit culture, or there's some way of framing it where you remove the ideological indoctrination and the the tithing, and like then maybe it's cool, and then maybe you've just described a really good gig.
Yeah,
I think that's like where I want to be with my spirituality.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right, Maddie, do you want to take this next bullet point?
Yeah, because this one, I mean, this could play into some questions that we ask a little bit down the line. Something I thought was really, really fascinating, because on your website, you have these different little pieces of trivia. One you had was about Arthur Russell. What point in your life were you exposed to Arthur Russell? And then what moved you to create short stories based around his recordings while studying music there at Wesleyan University in Connecticut?
It's really interesting. You know, you get perspective on things like when you've lived long enough. And, you know, I think like I just got caught up in a wave of, everybody had Arthur Russell fever that year, because like the year I was working on my thesis. So basically, just for context for the listener, like my undergrad thesis at Wesleyan University, I wrote essentially like a omnibus of critical essays about the music of Arthur Russell, and then staged a performance of both my works and his works in like an evening long concert with a like 15-piece band. And it was like my work, my culminating academic work for the year. And I remember I heard Love Is Overtaking Me First, which is, has like some country twangers on it. It has like members of the Modern Lovers and the Talking Heads playing in a rock band together. It has like some of the sweetest, most deliciously saccharine, like power pop songwriting of all time. And if you were none the wiser, you would just think that he was like a gifted kind of literary songwriter, like almost in the style of like a less countrified John Prine or something. But then you find out that like he's done all this other shit, and it's just as good and so varied. And I mean, I don't know what I heard after that, but just the fact that the same guy made That's Us Wild Combination and Eli, it's like they're so far apart. And then the more I read about it, the more fascinating it became. And I'm really blessed to have gone to Wesleyan for many reasons. It's a huge privilege that I got to go there, obviously, but it's a very cool music department, and still to this day, a very cool music department, because I got to do all sorts of stuff in my, quote unquote study of music. I like played gamelan a bunch. I studied with the like legendary saxophone free jazz musician Anthony Braxton, and got to like hear. Yeah, I like I think my first semester at college, I took a lecture with on the history of jazz with Anthony Braxton.
Dude, that's wild.
What guy to do that with? Oh,
yeah. And I mean, I was not prepared for that course, but it was very cool. They have a hugely open concept of what music is. I also studied with Alvin Lucier direct. Like I took he has this like, he ended up publishing a book of his like Music 109 lectures. And I took that course as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Was like completely mind blowing. So yeah, I mean, I just got to do all sorts of stuff. And when it was time to like find a thesis project, I just kind of like suggested Arthur Russell because I was like, I'm kind of into this guy.
Yeah.
And my advisor was he is his name's Eric Cherry. I forget the style of West African music that he is a expert on, but he's like done a lot of original ethnomusicology research on West African music, which is very cool. And he also had a seminar course on like the culture of downtown New York avant-garde music. So when I mentioned Arthur Russell, he was like, "Oh, I've heard this name before. Like, you should do this, whatever." I just had like, yeah, I mean, it was amazing that I got to do that. And I had full academic liberty to go as deep as I possibly could on this guy's works. And it's so cool because if you're like doing academic research on Arthur Russell, you get to talk about Allen Ginsberg. You get to talk about Namjoon Pike. You get to talk about Ali Akbar Khan. You get to talk about Francois Kevorkian. You get to talk about Larry Levon. Like all of these really disparate people. You could talk about the Talking Heads, all this stuff. So it was just really great. And it was an awesome lens for like learning about music. But then as I was working on his stuff and teaching myself how to play his songs and stuff, there was like there's a documentary that came out the year I was working on this thesis, which is like the I forget what it's called, but it's the one that everybody's seeing about Arthur Russell. Uh-huh. And then there's also like a proper scholarly book that also came out with like a symposium. So it was kind of funny because when I first started, I was like, "Oh, I'm doing some like original academic research. Like, look at me, I'm really a music historian.
Yeah,
this is cool." But then it turned out that like somebody had done like 10 times the research I could ever do. So, but yeah, I mean, it was I really felt like I got to know his work so deeply, and it was such a cool companion. And it's amazing that there's still more music. I mean, they just announced another record.
They just announced the one thing I've loved is so they've been doing cassettes recently, and they did what's this? This is 24 to 24 music, and that's basically kind of dinosaur stuff. And then there's the sketches from Echo, but they actually have an album of more World of Echo-esque material that they're going to do a tape, CD, and vinyl for, and I'm absolutely thrilled for that.
Yeah, it's super cool.
All of the stuff, all the reissues, because that's how I found him back in 2019. I'm just loved to dive into. So again, another question kind of stemming off of that. Did you find yourself enamored with other downtown composers? At least I saw Lamonte Young kind of there on the influence bio, but there's always been a current of minimalism going through some of your work for the past decade, I think.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I used to volunteer at the Dream House.
Wow. Are you going to be able to go and catch Lamonte Young for the show that he's announced?
I don't know. I've seen him perform before, and you know, I love a lot of his work, but I have to say, like, over the years, I've kind of soured on his position. I find he's very top down. He comes from this like guru kind of like worship mode that kind of turns me off now. And it's like the classic dichotomy of minimalism, but like Tony Conrad's music is way more meaningful to me now. Because I think he's just like I think I'm much more interested in a holy fool who stumbles upon divinity than I am a like wizened wizard who like sends dispatches from the castle. You know what I mean?
I do, especially because this is something that I think is really frustrating is like he doesn't allow a lot of his papers, his works, his stuff to really be disseminated. People have gotten in trouble or locked out as a result. And I think like even the shoegaze band Bowery Electric, that guy worked with Lamonte Young in the 90s, and that's why they were doing Drone on their second album. And something happened there between him and Lamonte.
Yeah. I mean, you know, he has a long history of alienating people. That being said, I mean, I think
still made some great works then, you know?
Yeah. And like, I mean, sitting for hours at the Dream House in my early 20s was like totally mind bending in both good and bad ways, I'm sure. Yeah, I love his work. I don't know if Tony Conrad really counts. He like famously moved to Buffalo later in his life, but I love Tony Conrad's music. I was obsessed with Glenn Branca for a long time, especially like as somebody who's primarily a guitar player. Reese Chatham. I mean, they're all great. There's so many names you could name. And then also, you know, like it's really like Julius Eastman is another Arthur Russell collaborator who's like, I read like, it's so cool to see Julius Eastman go from like kind of niche, almost like footnote curiosity in the academic and kind of avant-garde world to like now being like unequivocal quintessential genius that everybody loves and respects. And it's been very cool to see that happen.
Like, really, the first time I heard of Julius Eastman, I didn't even realize I was hearing of him in that moment was when Horse Lords had done the fourth mixtape with this, and they did stay on it. And that's become like an essential thing now, especially after the 2021 recording that has been done of the Eastman stuff. But it was, have you read Music Downtown by Kyle Gann?
You know, I haven't. I ought to.
I found it by accident when I was in Berkeley and then went to a library and rented it. And that would have had some of the only writing on Eastman ever. And he was doing an obituary very late for Eastman saying, we found out that he passed away last year. And he's writing this in 1991 and really, really torn up because he wanted to write about Eastman. He saw what Julius was doing and just believed wholeheartedly in it. But I have to recommend that book. That really shifted some stuff for me and made me interested to get into downtown music more than I had considered. Because if you come from like Thomas and I's background of like indie stuff, you might know music for 18 musicians because that just, it's ingrained in a lot of stuff. You might Lamonte Drone because it gets to the Velvet Underground, so it gets ingrained. And you would know Bronca because that gets ingrained in Sonic Youth. But outside of those composers, a lot of the stuff never translated to pop, really Laurie Anderson only being the other exception.
Yeah. I mean, there are like influences and touchstones. I feel like, you know, you could argue that like, you know, television has some kind of like compositional sophistication that's related to like the downtown composers, or No Wave is like just one step away from like whatever. But,
and there was a downtown scene and they were in opposition like Soho, so there's that aspect too.
Totally. And then I mean, like Love Goes to a Building on Fire is a really good breakdown of like all the simultaneous shit that was happening too, which is so like cool to think about. I mean, there's no other word for it. It's cool to think about because like samba, or like not samba but salsa and hip hop and no wave and punk and minimalism and loft jazz and like the dance music scene were all like emerging simultaneously, and they were all going to each other's parties. Super cool. I mean, it's like, it's kind of heartbreaking sometimes because in a post-AIDS, late stage capitalism, neoliberal world, I just don't see that much like fecundity coming back to any great American city anytime soon. New York in its like heyday downtown. I'm speaking authoritatively on this. I'm really just like a casual thinker of these things. But people were able to fuck off and do what they wanted. Oh, sorry. I guess I can't curse, but anyway.
It's okay. There's only been 3 curses. We're making notes. We're all good.
Sorry, okay, right on. People were able to pursue what they wanted to do without having to worry about crushing rent, crushing medical debt, whatever. Yeah. You could live in a squad on Avenue C and play in 15 bands and have a great life, you know? Yeah. I don't see that happening now. Not in the same way, at least.
Okay. So, we're going to switch gears again.
Okay.
So you recorded with Duchampion during your time in college around like this time, and you released one record. Can you tell us about your experience and like what you like learned from that and stuff?
With Duchampion, I mean, wow, that's that. So the Duchampion record came out in 2011. We recorded it in 2010. It was like weeks after I graduated college, and I had no clue whatsoever what I was going to do with my life. We like booked a tour, again, primarily through MySpace, and went up and down the California coast. This was one of the times I visited Isla Vista. And actually, a really amazing thing happened because we got to the Bico Garage where we were playing, and it was the band I was in, the band we were on tour with. And then like my buddy from Western Massachusetts was also on the bill. We had not communicated this to each other. We happened to book the same day at the same venue, 3,000 miles away.
That's crazy.
And his name's Jordan Connect. He's a he's primarily like a conceptual artist now, but he and the DJ in Chicago, but he was a great musician, still plays music every once in a while. And
I feel like I've seen that name before, but that's wild.
Yeah, Jordan's around. Again, he's not really playing music as much these days, but he's a wonderful artist. But that's all to say that we were in this like really kind of swirling, chaotic thing, touring in 2 station wagons. And at the end of that tour, we had a buddy who was like, he was the tape op at a really fancy recording studio in Eagle Rock in California. In LA.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, he was like, okay, guys, you can do like 72 hours at the studio for like $400.
That's crazy.
And like, I'll engineer it. Like, we're going to do it on off time. And that's like, we like cut that record with all tracking and all overdubs. I think it was like a 9 or 10 song record. We were very ambitious. It was like everything we'd been playing on that tour. And for the entire like year and a half previous, we had been a band. And we cut it like really, really quickly. And, you know, it was like all the live band takes on Friday, all of the vocals on Saturday, and all of the overdubs on Sunday. We just like did it. And that was like the thing that we put out. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I feel like that was so long ago. And it was at a period of time in my life where I was really like, I felt more like a jellyfish. You know, I was being like pushed and pulled by impulses and being kind of led hither and thither. I was like working as a telemarketer for the Metropolitan Opera at the same time as we were like trying to like figure out how to put out this record. And we like did it ourselves. We didn't like know what we were doing. Yeah. We like tried to tour on it. And then the band kind of like fell apart spectacularly. We never technically broke up. We went on an extended hiatus because one of the members like got a Fulbright to go to Poland for the year. And one of the rules about a Fulbright scholarship is that you can't go back to America during the time you're away.
That's wild.
Yeah. And then our drummer was like, well, that's convenient because I'm moving to Portland and I'm like leaving the area too. So we're just like, okay. And we just like did it. But I think like to this day, if I'm ever in a recording studio, I much prefer just ripping it really fast and like putting an arbitrary time limit on things. It's a bad habit that was reinforced by like playing with that band in the early days.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So was this?
But I love that record. I think it's still really good, honestly.
Can you still get copies and stuff?
No.
They're sold out as far as I saw.
I think sometime last year somebody tried to buy one.
Oh, really?
And, I was like, oh, I got somebody in the band got the notification. And we had to figure it out. So we were just like, oh, we'll just mark it as sold out. But, you know, it's like, we've toyed with the idea. It's like, should we put that on streaming? Like, is it good enough? Like, do people want to hear this stuff? It's like, probably not. But I still love it. And occasionally I'll play one of those songs in concert still.
Oh, dude, that's sick.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it, I feel. I don't know. When we got to see Tara Jane O'Neill and she, over the course of her set, kept playing songs back to stuff
further and further.
Yes, until it was just, I'm playing the first song off the Rodan album that we wrote. And she's like, I'm not playing any of the other stuff out of respect for Jason, but she just wanted to own, she could do that single song. And it was, that ruled.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. I feel like watching an artist interpret the same work over many years is a really cool study in the development
it's interesting. Yeah,
absolutely. And Tara was super aware of that too. She's like, I'm kind of like regressing in real time here. And there was something very humbling about hearing that from her, just knowing like she's going for this. She's really like trusting this audience just to take this.
It was also kind of wild how she was kind of just like, the show is band practice for me because I haven't played these songs in like 30 years or something. And we were just like, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
They get that.
Yeah.
They were.
Okay, so I guess should we move into down here, Maddie?
Honestly, at this point, I think we gotta talk the big guns. We're coming to the final parts, I feel. The real big final bout of the year. All right. You stated that Cicada Waves came out of the Cambridge Center's Artist Retreat in the Appalachian region of Georgia during the summer of 2020.
Correct.
Giving it a revisit today. it shocks me because it's a really rather unadorned piano recording, standing at that intersection of stuff like Rupert's Ruins and then just typical field recording tapes. Very unique. But you had also stated that this was a recording that you had always been curious to make. And what for you was that gestation period? What did that kind of look like or feel like internally to you that led to those 2 weeks at the retreat where you said, okay, now I can do it?
Okay, so I want to state something off the bat. I got to clear up a misconception about this record.
Thank you.
People often think that it is okay. So like, when you get like one of those old like 90s cassette tapes that's like Loons in the Mist and it has like music in the background or whatever, these like new age tapes, which I'm fascinated by, and I have a fat stack of them that'll go on these shelves eventually.
Are they the Environment series or whatever? Yeah,
there's a bunch of them. Environments is one of them, and Northwoods is like another. Like there was like a cottage industry of people making these kind of like.
Know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Well, a lot of people don't realize, like Environments in particular, Irv Teibel's, life's work. They were not actual field recordings; they were composite field recordings. He would take recordings of different things and make the kind of like version of being on a wood-masted sailboat or in a cornfield or whatever. And I'm really interested in the tension between what we perceive as like a real representation of an audio environment and what an actual real audio environment sounds like. Because if you just stick a microphone out in the woods, the thing you're going to hear the most is like the thumping of the wind on the microphone. You know what I mean? So just like, we kind of believe a photograph is real. We kind of believe like a field recording is real too. They're often composite or doctored or brought back to the studio or like the music's added. Okay. So with all that said, Cicada Waves is actually just completely unedited recordings. It's literally just a Zoom mic on a stand in a room. All of the sounds you hear were captured by the microphone. So that's why I felt it important you hear me getting up to turn the Zoom recorder off and on, and then you hear me sitting down at the piano. So all of the bug noises and the weather and all that stuff, that was all providentially happening as I was playing the piano.
Were there any artifacts, glitches, blips, random stuff with that digital audio that you got the first time around that you did keep in there?
I don't believe so. And I did have the recordings mastered because they had to go onto it's on streaming and it's on physical media. So there were certain like loudness parameters I had. I've been using this guy, Gus Elg. Shout out to Sky Onion Mastering in Portland, Oregon. He's been my mastering engineer for like 15 years. He did like a quick pass, but he really didn't do much. He just kind of brought them up to level, compressed them maybe a little bit. But they're really like, it is like, that's why I describe it as like improvised piano and encountered sound, because it's like nothing was added and nothing was taken away. I think you probably can hear like, when you hit record on a Zoom recorder, you can kind of hear like the vibration of the finger press going into the machine. You could probably hear that if you listen really closely to the recording, but I just wanted to get that out there, is that like people often talk about like, oh, if you just throw rain noise on a thing, it sounds vibey. That is true. But this is like I was really interested in just the actual like capture, because it made me play it really differently. Especially because I was playing the piano quietly enough to not be louder than the sounds that were happening in the environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
That explains a bit of the sound level, or at least how you would have to balance that then, because I couldn't quite tell. I had that assumption of you are just literally playing a piano and all of the sound is coming in as it is, but
yeah.
So dang.
Yeah. And I've tried to kind of replicate that recording environment, but I'm so rarely in a room that's quiet enough and with like an instrument that's compelling enough and with like time on my hands. It was a very unique confluence of like ideas I'd been thinking about for a long time. And then also like I went into that residency thinking I was going to like make a more traditional studio recording with like overdubs, and I brought like all types of gear. I brought guitar or whatever. And I just found that like the environment was so insistent in every recording I tried to make that I really couldn't I couldn't shut it out. There was no way I could angle any of my gear to not hear what was happening. So I just kind of surrendered. And to me, the surrender is like the most compelling part of like that whole process.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it goes, and that was when I saw the website, saw what you were going for. I'm like, oh, there's a cage component to this of just taking that chance, absolutely, and seeing what comes of it. And perhaps why it's really hard to have created that beforehand and created after. The circumstances were just here for this. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, something I like to say before concerts or, whatever, just when music is being created, I am really fond now of pointing out the fact that recordings only give the illusion of music being a repeatable phenomenon, but actually, like you'll never attend the same DIY concert twice. You'll never hear the same record twice. Mm-hmm. I'm very interested in the absolute uniqueness of a musical experience, and the further out from the recording of this, like it's like a 53-minute only piano and sounds album, the further out I get from that, the more I realize like how absolutely tremendously special that particular period was, and like can't be replicated. It can only be like thought of and considered and like mirrored.
You had done other artist retreats, but I'm kind of curious, like what had come of those? What were other things that you left with compared to this one in Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are props to your research department, because you're helping me thread the needle on certain like currents in what I've done that I haven't quite seen before. But I'm, just as I was saying with like that D-Champion recording from way back when, I like the idea of being like constricted and getting something done in like a bounded time. That's like the beauty of getting an opportunity to go work on stuff somewhere at a residency is like, okay, yeah, you have 2 weeks. Like, what can you do in 2 weeks? Like, how deep can your thoughts be? What can you actually accomplish? I've like had the fortune of going to different places, and like in 2013, I spent 7 weeks in southeastern Alaska in a town called Sitka.
That's sick.
Whoa.
Yeah, that work isn't super widely available. It's on my Bandcamp, but like I made like a feature length kind of experimental documentary called Double Alaska, and there's like I released like the recording of it on like a cassette tape version. And I really see that like these bounded experiences with their unique kind of like geographies and ecologies and sound environments and environments more broadly, I'm really compelled by the idea of like letting those things like soak into whatever approach is handy. And in a perfect world, I would find ways to do that kind of work all the time. But it is really the antithesis of the world we live in currently. And yeah, the fact that I've gotten to go anywhere and make music for a dedicated period of time is really a privilege I don't deny.
I guess we'll get into the controversy for some of the interesting stuff. I do remember at the time when Cicada Waves had come out. It came out on my birthday. Came out a week after Thomas's birthday. Very funnily enough, Thomas has the tape. I don't, but you were doing promotion on Discord for this. You did have a Discord for a hot second, and if I recall, you were in the Cached Media server, and then the Mountain server. Just briefly drop it in and say, "Hey, got a tape. This thing's coming out on NNA. Love to get some listeners." And then actually gets a ton of like little hot attention from, Bandcamp had some stuff on it. There were other little blurbs across, but I just knew the tape sold out and was always like, damn, really wish I could have got this. And then I looked today when I'm setting up for questions and stuff, and I hadn't realized that Andy Cush had interviewed you for Pitchfork on that ambient piece and went into some of the economical logistics stuff, looking at the Spotify streams, how this album, which reminded me very much of Grouper's Ruins, something that you could just put and listen to in a space and just kind of take it where you go, had picked up Spotify playlist attention and suddenly had 600,000 to 200,000 to 600,000 streams, depending on the cut. And again, how surreal has that aspect been of this work getting picked up by that kind of editorial aspect or an algorithm? And like how?
It's a fascinating world. I mean, just the numbers are so staggering. I haven't checked recently, but I mean, like, I think 2 months ago, the album crossed over 1 million plays on Spotify.
That's so crazy.
Which is like, I mean, unbelievable. And like the record, Youth Pastoral came out in 2020, just a year before it. And I think it's hard to put these things into metrics, but there was like certainly more critical attention paid to Youth Pastoral when it came out. And that only has like 180,000 total, and it's been out for a year longer. So
wow.
It's just amazing how much reach it's had. Actually, buddy of mine recently started dating somebody, and she, when you start dating somebody, you like I feel like you send songs a lot. That's like a thing you do.
Yeah.
And he very excitedly texted me to be like, dude, this new lady I'm really excited about, like, sent me a song of yours to be like, have you heard this? It's really beautiful. And he was really stoked that he got to be like, yeah, that's my friend. But like this weird, it wound up in her like Spotify weekly page.
Yeah.
And she like, and it was like this weird circular thing. So like, I don't know, man. I'm always like, I'm fascinated and kind of terrified by how like you make something, you share it with the world, and then once you let go of it, it's really not yours anymore. And it kind of just like does what it wants. And I'm always, again, delighted and a little terrified that things like continue to have reach and can kind of like snowball. So like, I don't know. It's a really strange world. I'm really grateful. And, I found out that like the biggest source of plays for that record on Spotify is the Spotify official Music for Plants playlist.
Really?
Yes. And I was really delighted to discover that like the beloved coffee shop that was around the corner from my old apartment, like had been playing that playlist often already.
Oh, dude, that's so sick.
Yeah. And it was like this weird thing of like, it doesn't feel real, but there are real people hearing it.
Yeah.
And it's not like 1 million listeners know my name. It's not like 1 million plays were like paid attention to. Like more often than not, people put on, oh, this playlist description matches the vibe that I want. I'm going to put it on and not actually cognitively recognize anything that's happening. But it's just a weird world. And like, I don't think that streaming pays people enough. However, it's really weird and surreal to like get any amount of money for anyone listening to your music on a streaming platform. Yeah. It's really bizarre. So I don't know. I feel like, depending on how I'm feeling, my like position on the matter changes. But it is just a strange world we're living in. And I just really hope that people, feel more empowered to make thoughtful decisions about what they want to listen to. I think that's going to be like really crucial for everyone.
It's like a new form of kind of media literacy.
Yes, exactly.
And this is probably why it's weird, because I talk with people about ambient music on Bandcamp. I write about this stuff for Tabs Out. So on occasion, and I don't try to write about a ton of it because it really has to resonate or stick with me. And so you have people making very personable stuff, whether that's like your project or why I think like Claire Rosé's music can really resonate or be so wonderful. But also, and this is the thing that like I think Andy gets into the article, Andy looks at that Tone Glow piece. I remember Thompson, I think we talked about that with Marsha Fisher ages ago when it happened. And that writer linked a lot of people and put a very particular take on the music that didn't quite, it almost made the point I think it really was trying to get at, but quite didn't, because it didn't recognize that these people also are like not going to make any money off of the streaming, and they're just doing it because they want. It's like you can take or leave Greenhouse's music, but I love their first tape, and I think that was just an absolute blast. But everything they've done since, it's had diminishing returns because it really was just like a one idea that you could only, I think, do once. And it's kind of stuff like, I guess that, is that aspect there, but.
I mean, I think a lot of so just speaking from personal experience, like every label that exists, with the exception of the biggest ones and a few extremely niche ones with like super dedicated followers, they have to find a way to market music, right? It's all noise, dude. I mean, like there's so many releases out there. There's so many musicians out there. Anybody with even it used to be anybody with a computer. Now it's like anybody with a phone of any capacity can make a banger that gets on the radio.
For sure.
Theoretically. And there's so much out there. And the job of the label is to try and find some kind of compelling hook that differentiates that release from the thousands of others that are being announced to release that day. And it's really hard to do. And and it's really hard to make money as a label, as artists, there's hardly any money to go around in all of music. We were talking about like being a venue worker earlier. I mean, being a label worker is the same thing. Like, there's been a lot, I've like personally seen a lot of turmoil in the like small corner of the music world that I've been privy to. And it's just a weird thing that like, okay, Spotify editorial, they have a lot of power. They can kind of like make a record profitable by putting it on these playlists, boom, with the magic wand. And it's kind of like free money in a way if Spotify kind of like knights you. And these labels are like, it's too compelling of a thing, they have to pursue. And then of course, like the more plays you have, the more likely you're to get more plays. Like it's this algorithmic game that we all have to play on like every platform that we're on. And so I think the Tone Globe piece is responding to what are like very real and felt pressures to make music compelling to the contemporary listener. And it's a really complex and knotty issue.
And it does require a bit, I think, of kind of you like getting into that, learning what you like and what you don't like, and having that literacy to convey that, while also still maybe accepting, okay, even if I don't like this, no, this does have value. This is really good. Then also be able to look and say, okay, we have these 2 or 3 noises here. It's like, well, I think Thomas and I have talked with Steve from Moonglyph about that a bit in regards to just like submissions or stuff you get and having to trust your ear to say, no, that's the piece, not this one. Kind of. Yeah.
I mean, the role of the both listener and the creator of music in the infinite libraries of the 21st century is one of curation. You can make recordings much more easily. You can hear other recordings much more easily. You can expose yourself to any, theoretically, it's not actually true, but theoretically we have like the whole history of recorded music at our disposal. And it's like much more a game of taste than it is an act of performance, I feel. But also like, it's a weird thing because I've been making, like I have 2 parallel lines in my work, which is like songs and guitar stuff on one side, and then like vibey droney or ambient stuff on the other side that's more instrumental. And like I've been doing the instrumental stuff to basically no attention for a really long time. And then like this kind of like ambient awakening happened in the throes of COVID, where people wanted nice sounds for their chaotic lives. And
for sure.
That's when this record came out. So like, I see that there's been a big change in the way people listen to music too. But I mean, it's a I guess the other thing too is that like, just because music has major chords in it and is gentle doesn't mean that it's unchallenging. That's another aspect of the controversy, I feel.
One other thing, I guess, because we talked about the Hudson Valley earlier, we talked a little bit about some downtown music now, but has there kind of been an underlying, I mean, is there at this point an underlying regionality in ambient music that has been pushed aside or kind of failed to be acknowledged and I think expanded upon? Is that even something that could be attained at this point? Like, I mean, it does sound, but Still,
I haven't really like. I feel like if you did like you remember the Pepsi challenge, where you had like a blind taste test of like Pepsi and Coke. I feel like if you had like LA ambient in one cup and like New York State ambient in the other, I'm confident I could pick one or the other.
You think so?
Like,
yes,
I think so. I couldn't tell you what the distinguishing characteristics are. I haven't thought about it hard enough yet, but I feel like that is possible. I mean, at least in the Hudson Valley, there's this. It's not. I mean, ambient music is a I would say a welcome change in the term to make it a really wide umbrella. Like I love that other approaches are being folded into this term and this way of thinking. But like a lot of what happens out here is actually like harsh free improv.
Yeah.
On the same bill as something that'll be like, major chord bloopy raindrop stuff.
It's like the notice recording stuff, which it's like 9 out of 10 that's going to be some of the harshest sounds you hear, and then you get a Lucy Liu release that just knocks you out. You're like, oh,
exactly. Yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know there are harsh noise improvisers in California, but I feel like they're less represented in the stuff I hear on my end.
It's true.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the harsh noise in SoCal at least is like very almost like punk. You know what I mean? Like almost in like a punk scene in a way. Yeah. I feel like it's like totally separated them from like almost like what like the floating scene is doing. And it's just like, yeah, it's like its own thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that kind of does it for all of the questions that we have.
Right on.
Yeah, we got a couple little listener questions here. Did you want to take these ones, Maddie?
I guess we can do these. These ones are they're real quick.
Sure.
Thoughts on Creed's Higher?
I think it goes pretty hard.
Yes.
And I also think that it is a delight to hear a recording that expensive.
Yeah.
Is it really expensive?
I don't know. I mean, it just sounds expensive to me. I kind of put it in the same category as like Third Eye Blind or like something like, it's like, that's like one of the nicest guitar tones for like one of the dumbest songs. Yeah, it's like, there is a joy to it. So those are my thoughts.
Have you seen the music video?
Music video? No, but are they playing Higher in that iconic Super Bowl clip?
They are.
Okay. Yeah.
Part of the method. And that might not be taught. That might be the peak of Creed, but the Higher music video is so good because it's about them going on stage to play Higher. And then at one point he like jumps and the video stops and does a 360 around and be like, look at him. He's floating.
Or it does like a bullet time.
Yes. And that feeling of like, there's something that is so like, oh, these guys are chast. They're straight edge, but they're going higher. They're going to rock this.
They're on the most addictive drug there is.
That's right.
JC, baby. Well, and again, I feel like it's probably a joy to see a music video that expensive. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. For $19.99, yes. With like, there's a making of it. Oh, so good.
Dude, I'm going
to have to check that out later.
I love putting Creed on at gigs, like in between bands and stuff. So good. My go-to is always like, for a while I was putting on like, who was it, dude? I have like a playlist. It's like, damn, I can't think of it. But yeah, Creed is definitely a go-to. Even Flow by Pearl Jam. That's one of my go-tos. That song is so funny. Yeah. Yeah. It's sick. Anyways, this next one says best disc golf brand /discs.
I added this last second.
Dude, I don't know, but I haven't played disc golf in probably like 18 years. But I will say very peculiar development in Troy, where I was living until this past weekend. There is a really substantial disc golf course in the big park in Troy. It is like straight up 18 holes, and it goes all through this like big park on a hill. And there's also a disc golf supply store in downtown Troy.
Really?
So for anyone who is a disc golf enthusiast and you're making a trip through the capital region of New York State, I would highly recommend a stop in Troy.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, it's a must.
Yeah. Shoot Rex on the show today.
Well, where can people keep up with all things Ben Seretan?
I'm out there. I'll plug my weekly newsletter. I have a project called My Big Break, where I write some kind of writing that's usually about 1,000 words, and I make some kind of recording that's usually in the ambient instrumental world. And it's like a cool newsletter you can read. It's at read.mybigbreak.zone if you want to subscribe.
Can people? Oh, okay, yeah, they can subscribe. Sick. Well, we do have one more question here. It's kind of the biggest one of the show. Do you want me to take this one, Maddie?
You go for it.
All right. Okay, so a rat is going to jump into your mouth. Do you want this rat to jump into your mouth head first or butt first, and why? It's a tough one.
I'm thinking head first only because that's the smaller end of the rat.
It is. That's correct.
That's true.
So you're going to get less rat in your mouth.
Oh, that's a good take.
I feel like the tail is a real problem spot.
Tail,
I would say head first.
Yeah. That's a good.
I'm concerned with the biting and scratching that might occur, but I think I'm going to take that over the tail.
Well, we've got some good news for you. This is it's a white lab rat, very clean, just the best of the bunch, was the brightest of the group. So don't have to worry about.
It's done enough mazes to know that it can just turn right around.
Yeah, exactly. It's an intelligent rat.
It'll say sorry, and you'll say, "Can that rat talk?"
Well, that's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. and NNA Radio every Saturday, Wednesday at 7. This has been Ben Seretan. Thanks so much, Ben.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. And thanks for listening, everybody.